everyone. I'm going to get started with us, and I'm sure we're going to have some more people join. But first of all, welcome to the third installment of Michiganders for Civic Resilience's Lunch and Learn series. Thank you for joining us for this timely and practical conversation. In today's political environment, communication too often turns reactive and divisive. We are pleased to welcome David VanderMolen, founder and chief catalyst of Inspired2Change. With over 35 years of in-field experience and personal practice, David brings a contagious passion of learning, leading, and listening. In 2022, he launched Inspired2Change, a people and organizational change agency dedicated to helping individuals and organizations achieve meaningful and lasting transformation. As an organizational change agent, David inspires people to pursue profound personal growth through his engaging and authentic communication style. Whether speaking on stage or facilitating virtual or in-person sessions, he combines storytelling, candor, and insight to make the often unspoken principles of leadership and relationships both clear and actionable. His work moves both hearts and minds, helping people lead and live with greater intention and impact. Outside of his professional work, David enjoys seeking adventure, riding his Harley Davidson, spending time behind the camera, and playing pickleball. We were just talking about pickleball. A proud native of Southwest Michigan, he splits his time between the Lake Michigan shoreline and wherever else the pursuit of a good life may lead. We're grateful to have David with us today. So let's get started. And David, do you want it to be interactive or would you like questions at
Absolutely.
the end? Okay, very
Actually,
good.
I'll have, there'll be a certain, along the way, if you have a question, feel free to kind of engage. I actually have some points along the way where I've designed to invite everyone to kind of share. Let me kind of kick this off by saying that this is really a presentation about how to turn um, incivility into civility. And part of the reason why I wanted to do this talk and to kind of convey this message is it goes back to the mission that I have for my organization, which is to be a catalyst to create significant, sustainable, and scalable change in people and organizations around the world. And along the lines, I've spent a great deal of time equipping leaders. I've been working to curate cultures, empower people, elevate people in the education field, and enhance performance. And that's really been a passion of mine. And so to talk today about this idea of civility in communication really fits into the broader perspective of things I've worked on and my passion point. And let me just share with you that prior to the call, I was talking with our coordinators here about why has personal interest to me. And it does because I realize in the things I publish, particularly on my social media platforms, I create a significant amount of engagement with people. And I find that I and the people who engage with my provocative post have a tendency, myself included, to move toward incivility. And so, as I'm going through this today and talking about um, civility and communication, I'm not talking from the perspective of I've arrived. I want to be clear about that. I'm talking from the perspective of I am a student learning this as well, and I have room for improvement. And so I want to be really clear out of the gate that that's kind of the position I'm taking as we enter in and talk about this. On the screen in front of you are a series of what I refer to as driving questions, and I'm not going to take the time to read them all. You can kind of glance through them as I chat, but I want to express to you that a significant amount of thought was spent in what are the most important questions and in the time allotted I could drill into, kind of dig out those answers and then unpack those ideas for us today regarding how do we do it? How do we move from incivility in our public discourse to more of a civil kind of communication? And so these questions kind of guided me along the way. And I went and did some research. I looked at several books that I think are pretty powerful that speak to this idea. Leadership and Self-Deception, The Outward Mindset, Choosing Civility, even a book authored by George Washington, which I think is kind of cool. And of course, you might be familiar with some more popular works that have been out here called Rude Democracy, Jonathan Hadid in his The Righteous Mind. I believe your last session you had actually the author, Hudson, talk about the soul of civility. And then I know this seems almost like even the title could be appear to be incivil. This idea of the relationship between the basic laws of human stupidity and all of these are kind of some resources I've tapped into to put together this presentation today. And so, with that in mind, let me just say that. Whoop, I lost my train here. There we go. This is what I want to accomplish in our time together. I'd like to take a few moments to assess our own civility or incivility of our communication. We're going to do that. We're going to really quickly here go to kind of checking in on ourselves. Where do we stand as it relates to civility or incivility? We'll talk about the difference between the two and try to give a really simple paradigm to help us understand the difference between incivility in our communication and what civil communication looks like. I think it's important, particularly in this day and age, to talk about what is driving incivility today and how is it becoming normalized. And so we'll touch on those ideas briefly and kind of chat about that. And then the bulk of our time, hopefully, will be about adopting the six pillars of civility in my personal and my professional communication. And that's our hope for you as we go through this time together. So that's the start. Does that make sense? Are you guys with me on that? All right, I'm getting some nods. That's good. Um, do I tend towards civility or incivility in my communication? Well, that's a question for all of us to kind of engage with. And if you'll look in your chat, you'll notice there's a link that you can click on, and you will have there an actual civility self-assessment. And we're going to talk about that. I don't know why, but my computer keeps freezing. There we go. And part of the reason I want to talk about this is because there's a significant amount of statistics out there and data regarding this nature of incivility in the world. 74% of US workers have personally experienced or witnessed some form of incivility in the last month. These are pretty new and fresh statistics. US workers collectively experience or witness more than 200 to 220 million acts of incivility per day. Think about that. 200 to 220 million acts of incivility. That's a lot. 63% of Americans say talking politics with people they disagree with is stressful or frustrating, up from 45% back in 2013. Now think about that, which that if you're in the world of politics and this matters to you, which of course it does, and to me and to all of us who are on this call, that says we're not talking because it's difficult. And that's a really important data point to keep in mind. 73, this is interesting, percent of Americans believe we now tolerate outrageous and uncivil behavior by elected officials more than in the past. And I would think that is very true. And this last one kind of leads to this idea of the civility paradox. Nearly all Americans rate themselves as civil, all. Yet only about 25 to 37% believe society at large is civil. So I'm civil, but y'all aren't. And that's basically what this statistic kind of points out. And so, we can spend some time kind of talking about that, or we could actually kind of go, all right, let's go and see where do we stand with this. And because this is an issue, and because many of us perceive ourselves to be more civil than we are, it might make sense to kind of explore where we are at so we can turn our incivility into civility as we move forward here. And I do not know why, but clicking does not want to work for me today. There we go. So here's the instructions. If you click on the link, you should be able to down a PDF with your actual your assessment on it. It's 15 questions. I'm going to have you kind of rate how often these statements reflect your behavior in political settings, debates, lobbying, negotiations, public, social, personal statements over the past year, quarter, or month. You choose the parameter. That's fine with me. And then you would record the number associated with your answer for each question. And then I'll begin by saying change begins with candid self-appraisal. So here's one of these things where people want to really rate themselves well. Okay. And I'm not going to ask you to give me your number. We're not going to do that. So this will be private. But what I would encourage you to do as you go through this to be very candid. Again, candid self-appraisal is where our change begins. And so you have the assessment you can download. It should look like this. And I'll give you the next few minutes to actually complete that kind of here in quiet. I'll post the first 8 questions and then I'll post the next questions. And you can either use this here to kind of record your answer, or you can use the actual PDF document that you have with you. Sound good?
Yeah, just a quick question. How
Please.
do we have to just do it on a piece of paper or the numbers, or are we able to like
You
click on
can
the
actually
numbers?
download the PDF and have the
Oh,
file with you. That's what
oh,
I would
gotcha.
do.
Okay.
And then what I would tell you just to expedite the process, I would literally just take that number and I would begin to accrue the numbers. Like what would you give your number for question one and begin doing that, and then we'll add those up at the end. Again, I
Gotcha.
don't want to know
Okay.
what your total is. You keep that to yourself. That's going to be private. But we will talk about kind of our experience going through this. And so I'll be quiet so you can take this in a reflective mode. So take your assessment now.
I should have had hold music ready.
Now, I'm not sure if you're using this screen to answer your questions or the PDF, but I'm going to toggle to the next set of questions, but I will toggle back. So you can use the PDF to access this. You can use the 2 slides in front of you. Are you guys good if I toggle back to the first 8 questions? I'm going to do that. And so here's the first 8. Again, you can use this, the PDF you've been sent, or another form if you can find it.
I'm having difficulty recording on an answer. Do I?
Share more, David.
Well, do I point and click on something? Do I just write it down on a piece of paper?
I would record it on a piece of paper.
Okay, fine. Great.
If you don't have the PDF in front of you,
Okay, no, that's just great. This is great.
sure, sure.
Um,
Sorry, I wasn't trying to be confusing.
Makes it easier. Yeah.
Tanya, are you complete? Have you gone through it? Okay. Ron, are you complete?
Yes, thank you.
David, you're close, I'm assuming.
I got the first 10. I'm looking for the second.
Yeah, well, then hold on. Let me give this to you. There they are. That's 9 through 15. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. Rebecca, I'm assuming you got yours done. Great.
Yep, I'm all set.
Pardon?
Yep, I'm all set. Ready for the
Awesome.
conversation.
I'm glad. I'm glad.
Three more. No, don't do that. Okay, thanks.
All right. So here is kind of the toggle forward here, kind of your score key in the range. So the lowest possible score you could get would, of course, be a 15, right? And if you are 15 between 15 and 23, I would say that's referencing a pretty high degree of civility in your communication. And I think that's a cool thing. I would say that 36 to 50 balance with nuance, meaning you're kind of balanced there. Subtle habits may limit collaboration, and you want to kind of look at what are the patterns that you have there. If you're over 51, areas for nuance, deeper self-reflection could enhance your cross-style impact, and you know that if that's you or not. And of course, if you're hitting the 66 plus number, um, I would say you lean toward a lot of incivility in your communication, and that might require some change. Um, so with that in mind, let's take a second and you've kind of went through that assessment. What lessons, insights, or revelations did you glean about yourselves from that civility self-assessment? I'm curious. And we'll just have the mic open and share. Not everyone at once.
Well,
Well,
David,
oh, go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
thought it was really interesting that there were a couple of questions that specifically dealt with nonverbal communication. I think sometimes we forget how much people gain from just our reactions and what we don't
Yes.
say or how we gesture or show our frustration. So that kind of caught my attention that it's not just what we send into, the social media universe, not just what we say with our words, but how we present ourselves as well, the nonverbal cues. That was interesting to me that you included that and
Yeah,
important.
I think so. I really do. Yeah. Tanya?
Well, and I think also just to kind of how much I want to be right and I want my point of view, people to believe in it, uh, too. It kind of caused me some self-reflection, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I did score highly civility, so
Well, good. Good. I'm glad to hear that. And there are parts of that particular assessment when I took it, I I went, ha, you know, I bet certain people would respond and they would say, always true of me, and it's not something favorable. And it's like, well, that's an insight. I need to keep mindful of that, right? And again, these assessments that we do are really designed, and more than anything else, to kind of provoke us to think and to process a little bit about what is going on in how we send our messages into the world. And I'll come back to that phrase in a little bit. Let's take a second, though, and kind of explore a couple more questions. And probably a big one for us to unpack is how does civility differ from incivility? Like, what's the difference between these two? And so, what I would suggest is civility is the practice of treating others with respect, dignity, courtesy, and consideration, even and especially when we disagree. And the studies would say that when we talk about incivility or civility, we're talking about three basic pillars to civility: respect, restraint, and responsibility. And by that, what we mean is valuing others, controlling our behavior, and owning the impact of our words. The essence of civil communication is those three pillars. This is rooted not just in the political science, but in sociological circles. And when we talk about civility, it always comes back to these three basic ideas. And in many ways, this kind of creates the house of civility. Now, incivility, by the way, was quite different, right? Incivility is very important to keep in mind. It's low intensity, rude, disrespectful, or discourteous behavior that violates norms of mutual respect and consideration in communication. And so, one way to think about it is that incivility are things like this. It's also subtle and ambiguous. There's sarcasm, interruption. There's that nonverbal eye rolling, loaded language, dismissiveness, personal jabs, devaluing comments, and defensive responses. All of this kind of really speaks to the idea of a whole lack of respect, a lack of restraint, and a lack of responsibility. In some ways, what we're saying with incivility is the three pillars, respect, restraint, and responsibility, they collapse. They just collapse. Kind of indicated there by the stones at the bottom. Those pillars no longer are standing because we're treating people as objects and as enemies. We're reacting impulsively. We're using loaded language or interrupting. We're not allowing negative impact of our words to really settle in us to understand, look, we own what we say, and that's really important. And although I'm an advocate of free speech, and we all should be, right? What's really important is recognize that my speech and what I say and my messaging has impact. It has import on the people around me. And so I should be mindful of that. And so when we talk about civility versus incivility, this is what we're looking at. Does that make sense? Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
totally.
So, what drives us to this kind of have incivility in our communication? And I want to talk kind of, I think, from a bit macro perspective, and we'll kind of dive in a little bit more of the nuanced pieces. Incivility in communication is often driven by polarization, stress, my unmet needs as I'm expressing to be heard. The digital environment has a huge factor on it because it rewards outrage. That's huge. And when ideology fuses with my identity and silence lets small rudeness go unchecked, disrespect becomes the new normal.
Mhm.
And that's exactly how it happens. And we'll look at this a little bit more too in terms of the normalization piece. But that's really what happens. And if we look on the left-hand side, we'll talk about it from the perspective of the internal. What drives this idea of incivility? I think it's a scarcity mindset. For me, I'm often in a place when I'm in a scarcity mode. And so when I'm communicating really out of that sense of I don't have abundance, I'm in scarcity. And also, I'm speaking out of a place of fear. Typically, when incivility comes out of me and others, you're going to see those two things at play. At the macro level, at the large kind of macro level, there are two other factors that are driving incivility. Social media, because it is designed in terms of the algorithm to create outrage and to drive attention. And anger is even more seductive than sex. The idea of
Mhm.
influences as well, and this the people around us who we're looking to and who we're watching. And it's a basic adage, right? John Maxwell said this a long time ago. Monkey see, monkey do. What I do, other people's begin to emulate. And so, why is there a drive toward incivility in our culture today? A lot of it has to do with the scarcity mindset, fear-based thinking, how social media is affecting us, and how we are listening and modeling, and in a sense, mirroring those influencers around us, whether they're political influencers or they're social media influencers, pundits, whoever it might be. Again, we talk, a lot about this, about, the model of who's around us and the models really matter. Boy, they really do when it comes to this idea of communication and incivility. So how is incivility in communication then normalized? And this one, I took some time and did a little research, and I'm pretty intrigued by this. This was new for me to understand. There's a concept called in the world of sociology called the normalization of deviance. Low intensity, rude, disrespectful, or discourteous behaviors, interruptions, loaded language, dismissiveness, that subtle kind of exclusions, are repeated without significant pushback or consequences. Those things eventually shifting from unacceptable to this is just how things are done. This is how we get from how deviance becomes normalized. And that's a pretty scary thought for us, particularly as it relates to politics, right? Here are the key mechanisms of normalization: repetition without consequence, social contagion and imitation, role modeling from authority figures, platform and environmental pressures, that desensitization and rationalization of poor behavior, and a lack of clear standards or enforcement of those. all of that leads to this idea of how we get from a place where there was civility to a place where incivility is now commonplace and normalized. This actually comes from research from Diane Vaughan, who actually studied the whole nature of what happened with the Challenger incident and how social normalization of deviance means that people within the organization become so much accustomed to a deviance that they don't consider it as deviant, despite the fact that they are far exceed their own rules for the elementary safety. She noted that in the whole Challenger issue, it became one deviation after another, and to the point where the deviation was now normalized and causing what occurred in that Challenger incident and the blowing up of the space shuttle. And so here's a sociologist looking at the nature of how does deviation, how does this stuff happen? How does it become normalized? It's really interesting. It becomes something that I think we should be mindful of. We, myself and you, normalize incivility when we remain silent, when we accept subtle indiscretions, when we choose indifference over interaction, and when we believe our voice is inconsequential. That's how we, myself and all of us in this call, perpetuate a normalization of incivility.
Is that somewhat related to what Daniel Patrick Moynihan once said about defining deviancy down?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, definitely tied to that. So the normalization of deviance, when you hear that, what bubbles up for you? And that's a pretty wide open question, but I'm curious. Okay, don't all talk at once. That crosstalk is a lot, so slow it down.
I think it's just
Are you asking us about our own lives and our own experience directly, or what we observe happening in the world generally?
I think I'm keeping it pretty open. So I would say you go. I don't know what bubbled up for you as you were listening to that. And so whatever that is, feel free to share.
This gets into politics a little bit, but
Sure.
I'm going to say I'm a closet psychologist. I had number one on most of those questions because I just seek to understand what people are thinking and why and where they're
Yeah.
coming from, and is there lack of character, or is there something else behind it? I'm struck with what's going on between Iran and the U.S., where, quote, our president, the United States president, not my president, is making all these bizarro, uh, foul threats uh, beyond belief. In Iran, as bad as we consider that um, regime, it certainly seems so, is pretty straightforward and direct in its communications. And it's always been that way, even when Jittabab, I forget the pronunciation of that, was president and there was conflict and inaction. He came across as the adult at the table compared with the way the United States behaved. So
Yeah.
that's we're not solving anything here, but it's just an example of, I don't know if that's technique that is being used or if it really reflects upon the character of those who are in these heated discussions. It's a big example of
Yeah.
what happens all the time in life.
It would seem that on the global political spectrum and what we're seeing, at least what we're seeing, and sometimes I wonder if what we're seeing is what's happening in behind closed doors, or if what we're seeing is a spectacle versus the reality of what's happening in the back room. But um, I do think that we do see a significant amount of incivility happening, and it continues to ratchet up all over the place, whether it's in the Michigan level or whether that's beyond in our national level or at the international level. And so um, uh, it certainly creates and has more potential for a lot of ill will, more than I think we realize. Yeah.
Well, it pushes whether you're talking with another individual or countries talking with one another.
Yeah.
The actual goal is to bring the parties together, and
Yes.
instead it pushes them apart.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, enough
Well,
from me.
it's interesting because it begs the question, what is your goal? And we'll actually talk about a little bit of this as we kind of move forward in terms of, am I being thoughtful with my communication in terms of what is the goal? Like, what do I want to achieve here? And hopefully, as we go through the six pillars of civility, that will help understand, give us a bearing in terms of how we can kind of improve that in our own communication. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. So, um,
Wait, excuse me. Well, when you had, this is
please,
Brenda
yes.
Anderson. When you
Oh,
were
yeah.
when you were listing the normalization of that, the immediate thing popped into my mind is tweets, press conference briefings, anyone coming to Congress for oversight. It's like that is saying that's how we do it now. And how do we unnormalize that when it's coming from
Yes.
the top every day, multiple times a day with nasty nicknames, with insulting people's intelligence. You used to be marvelous, now you're horrible. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's the blueprint of our country right now. How do we unnormalize that?
Well, I am glad you asked that question because that is exactly what we're going to talk about now. And the rest of our time, we're going to unpack that. And I'm going to, I believe, provide a roadmap that will help us get there. In your chat right now, there should be a PDF that Julie has just downloaded. I would encourage you to download that to your desktop. It's for reference afterwards, but it's a PDF for the six pillars of civility. And we're going to unpack and talk about that. And I would say that turning incivility to civility, if we're going to do what you just asked, is an inside out kind of experience. It begins within and it comes outside of us. And it requires us to show respect for people, to choose self control over unfettered self expression, and take responsibility for our communication and how it impacts others, culture, society, decisions, geopolitics, and our neighbor. I think that's really where we need to go as we think about this idea. And so let me give you the six pillars of civility, and we'll look at each of these individually and talk about how they relate to you and I and what we can do to make a difference. The first one is see people as people, not objects. And I'll take a few minutes to kind of unpack this one. Of all of them, this one actually is probably the longest because I want to make sure we're clear about what I'm trying to say when I say see people as objects versus see people as people versus objects. The second one is separate your ideology from your identity. I do a lot of work with change, and I am always surprised at how often people have wedded their identity with their ideas. And we believe that that is good and helpful. And I would like to suggest to you it is not. It creates people who are polarized in their thinking and who basically can't change. And so we're going to talk about separating your ideas from your identity. We'll also talk about the idea of recognizing change that threatens your idea.
Mm.
One of the reasons why we might struggle to move toward more civil dialogue and communication is because incivility seems comfortable to us, and we might feel like we're losing power. And making that change in me might appear to others as if we're being weak. And so it's a really interesting dynamic how you and I, when it comes to making a change, often struggle. These three pillars of civility are internal, they're principle orientated, it's mindset based. With those three, we then have three others. Own your outcome. And I'm going to give you some tools I think to help us think about that deeply. You're going to want to fight fair. I'm not saying don't fight, I'm saying fight fair. And there's a great difference between a street fight and a good fight over an idea. And lose the loaded language. And we're going to talk about how all of that contributes to you and I moving toward more civility. So I can't remember who was it that asked the question? Who was that earlier?
That was
I don't know
Brenda.
who that was.
Brenda Anderson? Yeah, me?
Brenna, is that right?
Yes, Brenda.
Brenda, thank you for this. To me, is our solution. How do we get to more civility? It's this. And so let me take a few moments to kind of unpack each one of these and how they kind of all work together toward you and I moving toward more civil communication. The internal stuff then feeds to the external stuff and how we show up. Let's begin with this idea of see people as people, not objects. Now, everyone on this call is going to say, oh, well, I see people as people. I don't objectify people, but you do. And I do too. And so let's take a second to kind of unpack what I mean by this. On the surface, people differ wildly. We can even see this on the phone call here. We're all very different. Our behavior, in our doings, we display all kinds of diversity. I play pickleball, I ride a motorcycle, somebody rides horses, and they love knitting. Lots of diversity. Below the surface, though, our worlds are very different. At the level of who we are down here, our being, there are only two kinds of people out there, you and me. One way of being is to see others as they are, as people. Listen carefully to this. Seeing them as people, I'm responsive to their reality, their concerns, their hopes, their needs, their fears. And this last one really helps me get to understanding what it means to see people as people. Others out there are as real to me as I am to myself. I see others truly, and I am true. This is seeing people as people. Now, I can shift very quickly, though, on a plane ride from one airport to the other to being, well, seeing people as objects. One way of being also is to see others as objects. Seeing them as objects, I'm resistant to their reality. If I see others at all, they are less than I am, just a little less relevant, just a little less important, just a little less real than me. Seeing people as less than they are, I'm actually blinded about their reality. This comes out of a book called Leadership and Self-Deception. If you haven't read it, you should. It's from a group called the Arbinger Institute. It'll just wreak havoc with your mind because it gets at the heart of my problem and our problem. And that is, I am repetitively throughout the day as I engage with people, shifting from seeing people as they are, as people who are as legitimate as I am, to seeing them as just a little bit less legitimate than me and objectifying them. We are always in a position of seeing people as people or seeing people as objects. There's no in between. And as I have dealt with this topic and dug deep into this in my own personal journey, I can tell you without question, I am not so flattered to say that I am more often than I care to admit not seeing people as people. I see them as objects. And that affects my communication. That affects my engagement. That affects whether I respond or I resist the people around me. And the only way we're going to solve things politically in this world is if we can see people as people who are as legitimate as we think we are. And that's at the core of this. So we kind of begin with this idea of seeing people as people. Almost all behavior, writing a note, giving a talk, correcting a child, all behavior can be done either way. Seeing that person as an object or seeing that person as a person. Because I'm only seeing people, others, as people or objects in the world around me. I'm either blinded to them or I see them clearly. And what's true about all of us on this call is we're constantly shifting our glasses to the blindfold, our glasses to the blindfold. So if we're going to make a shift, it begins with you and I getting really clear about seeing people as people. The idea I'd wrap up with is this. When we see others as people, not as objects, I am responsive to their reality. When people are as real to me as I am to myself, I actually see reality clearly and I avoid my own self-deception. I would say to you, and my own personal experience is this, that most of the problems I have experienced in my life are actually not from other people. They're mine. And often because I am self-deceived about what's going on in this moment. I'm seeing an object, not a person. Second, separate your ideology from your identity. Treat your political beliefs as ideas you hold, not as who you are. Identity is who you are at your core, your values, your character, your humanity. Ideology is a set of ideas and policy positions you currently believe are best. That's a big difference. There's who I am, and there's the things I think these are great ideas I think are good right now. When I fuse identity to ideology, criticism of our policy view feels like a personal attack. In turn, we defend our ideas as fiercely as we would defend our name or our family. The point here would be hold your ideas lightly. Hold them lightly. If you and I are going to move towards civility, hold our ideas lightly. Don't fuse them with our identity. Separation of identity and ideas equals freedom. We can strongly advocate for what we, and by the way, if I were to dismantle the slide right now and bring it to like a different view, it actually says the word believe there, but we noticed Julie and I earlier, it doesn't show up. I've never had that happen with the PowerPoint in the thousands of years I've been using PowerPoint. The word just doesn't show up. I don't know why. We can strongly advocate for what we believe without it referencing our worth. We can even change our mind on an issue without feeling like we've lost our identity. Separation gives us freedom. Identity from ideology. Third, again, this is an internal principle mindset. Recognize change threatens your identity. This is a big one. Adopting new, more civil communication habits might cause you to feel a little threatened, not because the change is bad, but because it challenges the story you tell about yourself and about who you are. When we choose restraint, pause before responding, or lose the loaded language, it can feel like we're betraying our identity, like we're losing a piece of ourselves. This is completely normal. We're wired to protect our sense of self. That's why so many good intentions to be more civil fade quickly. The threat to identity creates big resistance. Over and over again, when I teach change in organizations, the one thing I repetitively see happening is people won't make the change because the change doesn't fit their narrative. And other people have adopted their narrative about them. And if I make that change, it changes my story. And if I change my story, oh, that means I'm changing, and that's a threat. And so people often do not change. But if you and I are going to move towards civility, we've got to really kind of recognize this is going to happen and it is normal. We should push through that. We should not allow it to cause us to kind of not move forward toward more civil communication. Let me say it again in a different way here. All of these, seeing people as people, not objects, separating your ideology from your identity, and recognizing change threatens your identity, that's internal. That's principles, that's mindset. And that positions us with those three ideas to move toward our external behavior, practices, and methods. And so let's talk about those three that I think would make a big difference for you and I to move towards civility. Own your outcome. Own your outcome. Before you speak, type, or act in a political conversation, pause, reflect, and choose the result you want your words to create. Think, what is the outcome I want here? Make the shift from reacting emotionally to responding intentionally to others. Our words, our behaviors, our actions aren't inert. Words carry destructive or creative intentions. Our words give life or they take life from others. So really be thoughtful. And the three ideas here in the chevron, I'll speak about in a moment, but they kind of put us in a position to think about it one of two ways. Are you serving them soup or are you going to spit in their soup? Build them up, treat them with respect, help the conversation move forward, or tear them down, make them feel small, win at their expense. I am shocked at how often I can move toward and how often I see others moving toward spitting in other people's soup. It is so commonplace. If we're going to make change and have more civil communication, serve them soup, don't spit in it. Move it toward making this going in the right direction. There are three questions we should always be asking, and that's what those three chevrons represent. What do you want people to think? What do you want them to feel? What do you want them to do? These questions are magic for driving good outcomes. Now, most of us don't spend time thinking about this, but if we were to, what do I want them to think when I post this on Facebook? What do I want them to feel? What do I want them to do? That can create a tremendous amount of civility if we begin looking at those deeper questions about what we're saying, what we're posting, and the communication we have both personally and publicly. Make sense? Okay. The kind of fifth one here in terms of how we move towards civility is fight fair. Fight fair means disagree strongly and honestly. I like that, but doing with rules that keep the focus on the issue, not on destroying the person. It is about engaging in conflict in a way that is firm on substance yet respectful in delivery. It is to advocate passionately for your position, but you stay above the belt instead of hitting personal or low blows. I'll tell you what, my experience is this. When I receive a lot of low blows and hits beneath the belt, if it's on Facebook or if it's in a communication with someone else, 9 times out of 10, what that person is telling me is that they don't have a good argument. They actually don't have a good argument. If they do, they're really wrestling with how to articulate it. Because one of the things people resort to in communication or defending a point of view is actually to move away from actually talking about the argument at hand and instead to move toward, in a sense, talking at the person and kind of debasing them. Street fight, incivility, here's kind of the things we can see: the goal, the target, the weapon, the rules, the outcome, the aftermath. In a fair fight, we can see it very differently. Notice the target in terms of the goal for street fight: hurt, humiliate the other. Fair fight: clarify ideas and find the best outcome. Target: in a street fight, the person, their character, their motives, their identity. But in a fair fight, it's the idea or policy. And by the way, fighting fair is way harder than a street fight. Way harder. Requires more effort, more restraint, more self regard for people, more respect. You got to really step up with a lot of character. In a street fight, there are no rules. In a fair fight, you stay above the belt, you respect, you restrain, you're responsible. Outcome and aftermath are really important. In a street fight, damage relationships, escalated anger, no progress. In a street fight, I won, but now we can't work together. And I mean, I'm not being crazy when I say, like, we're seeing this in spades everywhere today. This is happening all over. Whether it's at the local level in Southwest Michigan where I live, whether it is at the state level or whether it's the national level or at the geopolitical level, we're seeing this being played out right in front of us. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. We can move toward more civility, but we have to fight fair. Keep in mind that disagree means we openly, honestly hold different views. Debate is we advocate vigorously for our position. Discussion, we exchange facts, reasons, and ideas. And dialogue is we maintain respect and connection in debate and discussion. These are terms today that we don't use very much because so much is about the street fight. But you and I, if we begin to moving toward having, I want to disagree, I want to debate, I want to discuss, I want to have dialogue, man, we get pretty far downfield with creating more civility and having an improvement in our communication. I love this inspirational idea. We can disagree and debate an idea vigorously, stand firm on our substance, but we do it inside the container of discussion, staying issue focused, and in the spirit of dialogue, treat the other person with respect and dignity. That's how we move toward more civility. This is not about being weak. This is not about being like woke or something. This is about being really intentional, respectful, restraint, and having responsibility for this engagement we're having with other people. And the last one, and this is a big one, lose the loaded language. If you and I are going to move toward more civility in our communication, we've got to lose the loaded language. Loaded language are words that carry extra emotional weight, judgment, or negativity. Loaded language triggers defensiveness, escalates tensions, and makes civil conversation difficult, even if our facts are correct. There's a particular pundit I love to listen to on Instagram, and this individual has a lot of very thoughtful things to say, but they have so much loaded language in their Instagram. I have to work so hard to filter that out so I can get the facts. They would be 10 times more effective if they just drop the loaded language. Loaded language turns policy disagreements really into this idea of a moral battle. Oop. Words like radical, extreme, disastrous, corrupt, or dangerous don't just describe an idea, they attack the person behind it. When we use loaded language, the other person stops listening to our argument and starts defending their dignity. And there we're already losing ground. I mean, look at all the stuff on the left. This is loaded language versus the unloaded language on the right. It's a very different kind of communication. Loaded language is a spectacle. Unloaded language is serious. And we are in a world where so much is spectacle and so little is serious about the policies, the ideas, the needs of people, state, local, national, international. There are 5 language traps we all fall into: adverbs, adjectives, accusations, exaggerations, and extrapolations. And if there's one thing that happens with loaded language, it's this all of the time. Words that add judgment or emotion, words that intensify how things are done, direct claims that blame or attack, overstating the impact or severity, and assuming worst case scenario out of something. I can think of the left, the right, and even radical moderates in the middle where this is so common. And part of it is because people are trying to create a spectacle, not be serious about the topics at hand. You can see the examples here, adverbs, adjectives, accusations, all listed. The loaded example, kind of a neutral bipartisan way, and why this would matter to make the change. I see this happen. I have participated in this. I've tried to defend against it. These word traps and loaded language really get us in trouble. By the way, often serious discussion is rather boring in black and white. It's not much of a spectacle. It's not entertaining. And so part of the reason I think we use a lot of loaded language, it creates more entertainment. And in many ways, we want to be seen as witty and clever, not really wise and respectful. And I can fall into that, and so can you. Here they are, the 6 pillars of civility. See people as people, not objects. Separate your ideology from your identity. Recognize change will threaten your identity. And if that's the case, push through that. Own the outcome of your words. What do you want people to think, do, and feel? Don't spit in people's soup, serve them soup. Fight fair and get rid of that loaded language. If you do that, you'll begin moving toward a higher degree of civility in your communication. And you and I can make a difference. Um, I teach a course called The Course, and it's a 3-day immersive experience on interpersonal communication. And it would be fair to say when people go through that experience, it changes their lives. And I know that sounds like a little bit of a hokum, as a trainer or a professional development person, but I tell you that it does. People come out the other end of the course different. There's a running thread throughout that entire 3-day experience, and it's the idea that I'm the message. And by that, we mean my message is just not my words. My message is my words, my demeanor, my tone, all the signals I send through my nonverbal communication. Not only do I send verbal messages to others, but I am also a message to others. In fact, I am the message. I don't give messages. I am the message. And what's important to keep in mind about this idea of being the message is I am the message from the moment my feet hit the ground in the morning until my feet climb back in bed in the evening. I am the message. And a big question for you and I, as we kind of wrap this up and kind of bring this to close, is are you on message or are you off message? Are you on message with civility or are you off message with incivility? And that would be my call to action to you today, to really decide, are you on message? Are you off message? I know what is more productive. I know what makes a bigger difference in the world. I know what creates positive change is to be on message. And there we go.
Well,
So,
on behalf of our team at Michiganders for Civic Resilience, myself, Tanya Shootmaker, and Julia Pulver, I just want to say a big thank you to you, David VanderMolen, for this engaging, informative, and definitely thought-provoking presentation today. Want to say thank you to all of you who are joining us today on the Zoom and those of you who are watching the recording that we will post to our YouTube channel later. The reason that we do this work, this programming, is really designed to help empower us on our team, those who are engaged in the work that we're doing, with the tools and knowledge necessary to transcend identity-based politics and political affiliations and put people first, work together to restore civility in our politics and public communication. This programming is meant to be helpful to us and those who support our work, and to make sure that we are continuing the kind of programming that is making a difference to all of you. We have a survey that we would like to ask folks to take to make sure we're on the right track. So Julia has shared in the chat a survey. Some of you who've been supporting us for a while might have had a chance to do this survey. We've done it once before, but not for a couple of years. But there is a short member survey that you don't have to take now, but the link is there. And if you would help us by just taking that survey when you have a chance and giving us our feedback, we would truly appreciate it. Julia, anything else that we need to do from the administration side?
No, that's it. I think I'm just going to go ahead and close this out here. So yeah, thank you
can't hear
everyone for
you.
joining.
Can't hear
Enjoy
you.
the rest of your day.